Can you play Diablo Immortal free to play? Is it free to play viable? These are the most common questions that I see related to the game. Now, when you think of pay to win, you're very often going to think of resonance. For instance, I have 3,000 resonance, which increases my base attributes by 150%. That means my damage, and that means my life is going to be 150% higher because of the resonance that I have acquired. When you think of pay to win, you're also going to think of the effects that come from 5-star legendary gems. For instance, movement speed, damage, all of the really good stats, summoning a clone, having AoE damage, all of these really good skills that effectively come from legendary gems. But do we actually need both the gems and the resonance in order to play the game? Now, in PvE, as you climb through the hell difficulties, the thing that matters is combat rating. If you do not have the combat rating, you cannot kill the monsters, basically full stop. It is that simple. However, if we go and actually look at my equipment, you're going to notice with all my gems on, I have 13,978 combat rating at this time. I've also been fairly lazy about doing things like raids. There are people that have way more additional combat rating from things like Tableau or from the Heliquary raids, which are not pay to win remotely. These are only things that you grind every single week in order to get basically combat rating rewards weekly. Now, it is true that combat rating is acquired from gems. So if you have massive amounts of gems, you will have higher combat rating than other people, allowing you to access the content sooner. The only time this is really true and viable is when they need that additional little bit of combat rating between hell difficulties. For instance, when you go from one server paragon to the other between difficulties. So when most people are hell 7, a couple of the whales will be in hell 8 who just happen to have enough combat rating from gems. So in PvE, if you've spent thousands and thousands of dollars, you will get a few days to like a week advantage in terms of being into difficulties a little bit sooner because you have that combat rating a little bit sooner than other people. However, here's the thing. That advantage doesn't really matter because when you look at combat rating, I have 2,668 combat rating higher than the max difficulty. In fact, I have basically 14,000 combat rating here. And if you look at this, what we need is 11,310 combat rating here. So what happens if I remove every gem that I have equipped? Here you go. I'm still 13,248 combat rating. So you can see where I'm coming with this. The combat rating only matters for a short period of time, and it's arguable even then it doesn't matter because the advantage they get isn't really an advantage. They're just accessing the PvE content a few days sooner. Now, here's where it does start to matter. They take that advantage during that small time gap and move to PvP. You're going to get absolutely crushed by the people that have the next difficulties gear. But in PvP, that ship is already sailed. In PvP, there is no debate. It is not free-to-play friendly or viable. You can, in fact, play PvP, but that doesn't mean you're going to be good at it. Part of the reason for this is because of how secondary stats work. If you look at secondary stats in these games, for instance, the tourmaline and potency from the normal gems, these secondary stats have to be within a certain rank or rating of somebody in order to have the stats effect. So what I'm trying to say is I have, let's say, 1,100 armor, but the well has 3,000 armor, okay? But I only have 1,800 armor penetration. I'm going to get the minimum bonus available against him. I'm not going to, in fact, I'm not going to get any bonus basically against this guy. He has too much armor. Whereas if he has more armor penetration than I have armor, he's getting a benefit from that as well. So it's not just combat rating in PvP that they get the benefit from, the 10% bonus. They're also getting a benefit from their armor penetration, their potency, and their resistance. The ship has sailed in PvP pay to win. It is pretty busted. Now, here's the thing about the PvP pay-to-win being actually busted in Diablo Immortal. The map is the thing that's the problem. So while there is actually a massive pay-to-win in the game in terms of PvP performance, the big complaint that everybody has is the fact that the map is unbalanced. They have a very poor PvP map that makes the battlegrounds unenjoyable because of how the offense and defense, and they've been trying to get this to work better, aren't equal in terms of difficulty. In fact, it's probably the best it's ever been, but it's still quite not equal. The matchmaking itself in PvP is also an issue. They've tried to optimize the matchmaking to make it better. It's still hard to get the classes on this, the right sides to divide up the classes and divide up the resonance and all the pay-to-win stats. They just can't quite get that calculus right. But when it comes to PvE, the equation is quite different. In fact, gyms can be good even if they're not 5-star. I myself have a maxed ranked out 2-star because the 2-star gyms can be quite good. A lot of the 1-star gyms are actually quite viable as well. And since you don't really have to worry about having the combat rating for them, you mostly need to worry about getting the combat rating bonuses from things like raids and the warband, which are 100% free to play friendlier, more a social thing than it is a credit card swiping type of ability. For this reason, the PvE is actually quite good as free-to-play Diablo Immortal. Now, in order to climb the hell difficulties and unlock the next hell difficulty, you have to be able to beat the previous hell difficulties raid boss. And this is where the combat rating does take a jump. For instance, you see we need 16,666 combat rating in order to defeat the Hell 8 maximum difficulty boss. Well, this is quite a large ask. I mean, I have 14,000 with my gyms in, so there's a 2,500 combat rating difference, and this is where you start to notice the woes in PvE. Luckily, you only really need to beat the raid, so you can party up with other people that are farther in the game than you to defeat the raid in order to unlock the Hell difficulty. Most of your time in the game is going to be spent overworld farming, killing mobs in the overworld in order to get more legendary items, and hopefully some of those legendary items have triple stats in order to give you even more combat rating. You see, you get 1 combat rating stat per either fortitude, vitality, intelligence, etc. Any of these stats, you're going to get 1 combat rating for, and so effectively what you spend your time doing is going around looking for triple stats on your equipment in order to juice up your combat rating in order to be viable for the next PvE requirement. You're also going to spend a large amount of time inside of the dungeons, and these dungeons are slightly higher combat rating than the hell difficulty you're in. For instance, the Hell 8 one's like 500 combat rating higher. So right when you hit Hell 8, you might not be able to do the dungeons, whereas someone who had spent some money could instantly do the dungeons, let's say, sooner than you could. Whereas if you're free to play, you're going to have to get some more combat rating. And that combat rating is going to have to come from basically grinding gear in the overworld in order to get enough combat rating to be able to participate in the dungeons. Or you can just go into the party finder system, because there is actually party finding in this game. And this is how most people do it. And you can just queue up with somebody literally anyway. What's also cool about it is they've recently changed it where the hell difficulties no longer matter as much once the server paragon level is high enough. So once the server paragon level is like 800, for instance, all dungeons up to hell difficulty 8 are soloable, and it will scale down the difficulty of the mobs in terms of HP performance, not combat rating, in order to make it soloable for you in the dungeon. So if you're somebody who actually wants to play solo, they've been doing a lot of patches in the game to allow what seems like free to play and solo viability in PvE. Now, there are other aspects of the game, for instance, like PvP towers in the clan system where you have to fight in 10v10 matches, etc. And if you are somebody who is 100% free to play and you're starting newer and you're behind the curve, I would not expect to be able to participate in this type of content, as this is sort of the pinnacle strongest of the clan is fighting the strongest of another clan. So there is some content, even people like myself, if I was not a YouTuber and getting access to some footage, even people like myself who have spent, a couple $1,000, I still would not get access to this type of content other than just having a clan that's letting me do it. So be aware that there is some stuff in the game that is pretty much locked out to hardcore wells. But to be honest with you, the PvP in this game is worse than the PvE. I actually like the PvE. The PvP is primarily well territory. If you spend a lot of money in the game, it can be more of a fair, balanced ecosystem because people climb to the top and then they're all kind of fighting amongst themselves with the higher resonance, and that's fine. Wells can beat up other wells, etc. But if you're free to play, trying to dip your toe into PvP, you'll probably be frustrated. What's a real bummer, though, is people letting pay-to-win PvP ruin an otherwise pretty good free-to-play viable PvE game. They're constantly adding new legendary essences, so there's a lot of different builds, types of items to use, different summons available. Like I'm playing the Necromancer now. You can class change. It's the only Diablo game you can class change, so you can go from Wizard to Necromancer to Barbarian to Monk. You can do all of these, and all of this is not locked to you as free to play at all. I mean, basically none of the game is locked behind a pay-to-win wall, except for the Awakening, which is, in my debate, needs to be the thing they change, and then free to play is extremely viable viable. And Awakening is effectively once you have a rank 10 gem, which is viable for a 1-star gem for free to play, it allows you to get a bonus. For instance, if you look here, it'll tell you what this does, increases, golem damage 12%. But if I go and I put a rank 10 gem in here, and then we look at it again, look, now I get an additional 10% golem damage, or sometimes it's cooldown, etc. So these Awakenings from having a rank 10 gem, you say have a rank 10 2-star in there, is actually viable for free to play with 1-star gems after a while. So I do wish they would add the Awakening side of the game. But other than Awakening, if you're planning to play free to play casually, it's actually a pretty fun game for that. Now, there are some things you're going to be behind on, okay, when you start, that is not related to pay to win. For instance, if you start as free to play, you're going to be behind on something called blacksmith upgrades. These blacksmith upgrades that allow you to get reforged bonuses, and these require a lot of scrap, which effectively require you to farm a whole bunch of just overworld garbage materials in order to be able to level up your primary gear. This primary gear will be leveled and go with you everywhere, but it does take a very long time. In fact, I'm behind. Most people have like rank 26, 27. People are getting crazy high numbers, whereas I am on 17, 17, 19, 21, 21, 21. I am behind myself because that is a time-gated thing. So that's actually something that is free to play almost friendly because it's time gated, not pay to win gated, meaning if you're playing more than Wells, you can actually grind higher blacksmith upgrades than the Wells who started at the same time. People that started a year in front of you, they're going to have that level advantage on you. They'll also have an advantage in terms of your Heliquary levels, which is where you get from doing the raids weekly, and they'll have the Warband Tableau advantage on you as well. These are all time gated mechanics. There are some catch-up mechanics associated with these types of things, but just keep in mind that you will be behind on that. So you might feel weaker than the average person, and that's not associated to pay to win. That combat rating bonus is associated with just time in the game over a month-to-month period, not necessarily just hours spammed in one day. It's a weekly time-gated thing. Now, recently they have been upgrading the way that you can craft gems. So now you can get legendary crest, you can craft 2-star gems, you can craft 1-star gems, and these are much cheaper than they used to be, allowing free to play to have a somewhat viable option to actually ranking 2 stars up all the way after time. This is still more viable for 1-stars, as 2 stars are 4 times the expense of 1-stars when it comes to actually crafting these. However, with the new addition of the crafting and the new edition of the Pearls, effectively allowing you to craft your own 5-star gems as well through the Pearl system. This has been an implementation that will make your legendary gem acquisition as free to play the best it has ever been. There's also some events currently in the game that as you level up the events through doing different tasks, you will receive better and better rewards, which themselves will give legendary gems. Now, these are 1-star legendary gems, but you need duplicates and you need powder in order to level them up anyway. So any gems are always good at this point. And this acquisition of the Pearls where you can craft the 5 stars, this was an amazing addition to the game. I do believe that these should be more common for free to play. They do take quite a while to get enough of these depending upon the events they put out and how often the events are coming out. But for the most part, this can take a long time to acquire. So to answer the question, is Diablo Immortal free-to-play friendly? I don't know about 100% friendly, but it's viable. You can actually play the game free-to-play. The PvE is actually quite good, even as free-to-play. I myself know plenty of free-to-play people that are either on my power level, some of them actually stronger because they've been grinding harder than I have since the start of the game. You can access all of the PvE content that's available in the game as free-to-play. You can team up with people who are not free-to-play. You can play solo now better than you ever could, or you can find a party a little bit easier than you ever could before. The game actually suffers from a massive amount of backlash from the completely ruined pay-to-win PvP, which is fair and just. But that does make it where the PvE has been discouraged for people that want a casual, fun PvE mobile game. And that is effectively where Diablo Immortal is probably the best.